week I got a lot done. I was able to run through the account data at a macro and micro level. I pretty much found that our deduplication efforts, though great in theory, were probably a pipe dream. So we're not going to deduplicate the data, and I'm going to show you how I came to that conclusion in a second here. But I did also get to complete this week the validation, so to speak, but it's really the pre-validation piece where I understand what the data is before I try to validate it so that I know how many contacts we have per a business account. And I know that that average is a little over 2. And when we migrate the data over, we should have about the same. My point being, I have to understand what the data is first in order to validate it. So I was able to do that with not just the account data this week and the contact data, just with the leads and opportunities data, which is great because that saves me probably a day of work later when I start validating the lead and opportunity data. And the reason it's important is if I don't see 2 contacts per business on average, and I see something like 1, then I know that maybe something went wrong in how we loaded the data, and it's a good place for me to start in my investigations, that detective hat that I have to put on. And I was also able to do a lot of the work that requires getting the BDC on the new systems, and after all this data is pushed into the system, then y'all can be on it, and we'll pilot it first and everything. Okay, so I thought I could explain what's going on with this data validation through the children's game Memory. And if you ever played Memory before, you know it's a board game of randomly assorted pairs of cards, and you're supposed to turn one over at a time, and you hope that you find a match. And if you find a match, great, you get to go again, you get to find another match. And if you don't, you lose, but you know where that card was, and you know everything about it so that you remember where it is later. So to validate the data, I basically am looking for a match, right? But instead of having one board, I have 2 boards, and I'm working with the new and old Salesforce rather than all on one board. And so you'll see with this first image that I have that we have like 18 cards that we're trying to find a match to, and they're not in the same board, so I have to like look at what's in that board and then go look at what's in the other board. And all of these cards have the account data on it, so like phone number, name, what branch they're associated with, etc. And I want all that data to come over because we don't want to lose any of it. So we go through the whole process this couple last weeks of getting the data into the system. And the first thing I notice, as you will see in my example, is that we have less counts than we started with. So in this example, in the new system, or that second half of my memory board, I only see 14 counts, but we originally had 18. And so that's a good indicator that like, okay, maybe something's not working, but at the same time, we attempted to deduplicate the data, and so maybe it's just a deduplication impact. So it's a place for me to start digging deeper. And in order to do so, I really need to flip the cards over to understand what's on them, right? The discovery of that in order to memorize or validate, we'll say, what the data is. And I'm hoping that you can gather from this example how things can get complicated fast. We're going to walk through a couple examples. Looking at Round Rock Toyota, which is in Salesforce, and it's also in Syspro. So we deduplicated it. But when I look at the column on the right, the Round Rock Toyota in Austin with the phone number, and I see that its ID at the very top right corner is OX1. The way you step. And I look at what happened in the new system. Well, I see the name, great. But it says it's attached to UA Holdings and it has an S22 for the ID. So I'm a little confused of what's going on until I realize, oh, right, S is for Syspro. That's how I'm identifying that this is a Syspro record. So we deduplicated it and we got the Syspro record. Great, that's what we wanted to do. What we didn't take into account was a couple things. For example, in Syspro, this is a UA Holdings record, but in Salesforce, this is an Austin record. Syspro doesn't have the phone number. Salesforce has the phone number. And so if we dedupe in Syspro, we lose that financial piece that it's tied to. But if we dedupe in Salesforce, we lose the sales piece that it's tied to. So this is really complicated and will take a long time to really figure out, and not really within scope to deduplicate the data. We thought that we could do it as we were loading the data already. It wasn't more than a couple lines of code, but it's a lot more complicated. Decided it was a pipe dream, so that's what happened this week. Peace and love to you and yours.